They found the room empty, but my fingerprints were on the inside of the door. That's what the detective told me, anyway. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. No drama, no judgment, just a simple statement of fact that didn't make any sense, because I had never touched that door. I had never even seen that room before the night everything went wrong. The room didn't exist on any blueprint. And the man who vanished inside it was the reason I stopped taking night jobs. 3 months earlier, I was working as a maintenance contractor for a chain of older office buildings in western Pennsylvania. The kind of places that used to be busy in the 70s and 80s and now mostly survived on a handful of tenants who liked cheap rent and quiet hallways. My job was simple: fix what broke, replace what couldn't be fixed, and do most of it after business hours so I wouldn't get in anyone's way. That's how I ended up with the call for the Belridge building. Belridge was a 7-story brick office block that sat just off a state highway. It used to house an insurance company, then a printing business, then a law firm that went under. By the time I got the contract, only 2 floors were still rented out. The rest of the building was dark most nights, except for emergency lights and the occasional security patrol. The building manager, a woman named Carol, told me the problem was a door that shouldn't be there. She laughed when she said it, like it was a joke she'd been telling all week. 3rd floor, she explained. Storage corridor. One of the tenants swears there's a door at the end of the hall that isn't on the plans. They say it showed up sometime last month. I assumed it was a misunderstanding. Old buildings settle. Walls get moved. Someone forgets what used to be where. It happens. Still, she wanted me to check it out. I arrived around 8:30 p.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, and the building looked like a dark block of shadow against the overcast sky. A light rain had started to fall, the kind that doesn't make much noise but soaks you through if you stay out in it too long. Inside, the lobby smelled like dust and old carpet. The security desk was empty, but a guard named Mike was doing rounds somewhere upstairs. Carol had already gone home, leaving me a temporary badge and a note with a quick "thanks" scribbled at the bottom. The elevator to the 3rd floor groaned like it was waking up from a long nap. The 3rd floor was quieter than I expected. Half the overhead lights were off, leaving long stretches of hallway in a soft, yellowish gloom. The storage corridor was at the back, past a row of closed offices with frosted glass doors. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Just a narrow hallway, beige walls, gray carpet, and a line of old storage rooms with metal doors and faded labels. At the far end, though, there was something new. A door. It was wooden, dark-stained, and didn't match any of the others. No label, no room number, no sign of recent construction around it. It looked like it had always been there, except I knew from the plans Carol had emailed me that there was supposed to be a blank wall at the end of this corridor. I walked closer and checked the frame. No fresh paint, no tool marks, no dust that had been disturbed. It was clean in that way old things get when they've been untouched for a long time. I tried the handle. Locked. I took a photo with my phone and sent it to Carol with a quick message. There's definitely a door here. Doesn't match plans. Want me to open it? She replied a minute later. If you can. But be careful. Security says one of the tenants complained about noises coming from behind it. That made me pause. Behind it didn't make much sense. The building ended here. According to the blueprints, there was nothing beyond that wall but exterior brick. I went back to my van for tools, grabbed a small flashlight and a set of picks, and returned to the corridor. The lock wasn't anything special. It gave way after a little pressure. The door opened inward. The room beyond was dark, but not empty. My flashlight beam cut across bare concrete walls and a low ceiling with exposed pipes. It looked like a utility room that had been sealed off and forgotten. No windows. No furniture. Just a single fluorescent light fixture hanging crooked from the ceiling. And in the center of the floor, there was a man standing with his back to me. Hey, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Building maintenance. Didn't know anyone was in here. He didn't respond. He was tall, wearing a gray jacket and dark pants. His posture was stiff, like he was listening to something far away. For a moment, I wondered if he was another contractor or maybe a security guard checking the same complaint. I'm going to turn the light on, I said. The switch was just inside the door. When I flipped it, the fluorescent tube flickered and hummed before coming to life. The room filled with a pale, buzzing light that made everything look slightly wrong, like a cheap hospital corridor. The man still didn't move. That door isn't on the plans, I said. You can't really be back here. He turned his head just enough for me to see part of his face. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't scared. It was distracted, like he was trying to remember something important and couldn't quite get there. Did you hear it? He asked. Hear what? The other room, he said. It's quieter tonight. I didn't know what he meant, and before I could ask, he took a step forward, away from me, deeper into the room. That's when I realized something was wrong with the space itself. The room was bigger than it should have been. From the doorway, it had looked maybe 15 feet deep. Now, as he walked, the walls seemed to stretch. The back wall didn't get any closer. The light above us didn't move with him. It stayed exactly where it was, like the ceiling had decided it wasn't going to follow the rules. Sir, I said, feeling a cold, tight sensation in my chest. You need to stop. He didn't. He just kept walking, slow and steady, until the light from the fixture didn't reach him anymore. And then he was standing in shadow, in a room that should not have had any shadow that far from the door. Security? I called out, even though I knew Mike wasn't on this floor. Sir, come back here. He turned around fully this time. I could see his face clearly now, and that's when I understood why his expression had bothered me. He looked like someone who had been listening to a conversation for a long time and was afraid of missing the end of it. It's closer, he said. I think tonight it's closer. Come back, I said. There's nothing back there. He smiled at me, just a little. That's what it wants you to think. Then he took one more step backward, and the room took him. I don't have a better way to describe it. He didn't fall. He didn't disappear in a flash of light. He just wasn't there anymore. The shadow he was standing in folded inward, like a curtain being pulled closed, and the space where he had been was suddenly empty. The back wall was there now. Solid. Close. Exactly where it should have been all along. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The room was small again. Normal. Just concrete, pipes, and a crooked light. No man. No shadow. No extra space. I took a step inside, then another, half expecting the floor to drop out from under me. Nothing happened. I walked to the back wall and touched it. Cold. Solid. Real. Sir, I said, my voice echoing slightly. No answer. I backed out of the room and called security, then the police. Mike showed up first, out of breath and confused, and stared at the empty room like I was playing a joke he didn't understand. The officers arrived about 10 minutes later and did a full sweep of the floor, then the building. They found nothing. No hidden passage. No extra room. No sign that anyone else had been there. They did, however, find my fingerprints. On the inside of the door. That's the part one still can't explain. I never touched the inside of that door. I opened it from the hallway. I stayed in the doorway. I never reached back to pull it shut. But according to the report, my prints were on the inside handle. And according to the building's security cameras, the door at the end of the corridor never opened at all. The footage shows me walking down the hall, stopping at the blank wall, standing there for almost 8 minutes, and then turning around and leaving in a hurry. No door. No room. No man. The Belridge building sealed off that corridor a week later. They put up drywall and repainted it to match the rest of the floor. Carol told me they didn't want to deal with the liability. I didn't argue. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about what the man said. It's closer tonight, and I wonder what happens when it finally gets close enough. The voicemail was from my own number. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. The second was the timestamp. It said it had been left at 2:17 a.m., which was impossible, because at 2:17 a.m., I was standing in my kitchen, wide awake, staring at my phone while it rang in my hand. The third thing was my voice on the recording, whispering, "Please don't pick up again." I used to work overnight dispatch for a small towing company in Ohio. Nothing glamorous. Mostly stranded drivers, dead batteries, the occasional accident on a back road. The night shift was quiet, predictable, and usually boring enough that you could feel your brain slowing down around 3 in the morning. That night started the same way. Rain, empty roads, a flickering fluorescent light in the office, and a radio that only crackled when someone forgot to turn it off. I had a mug of burnt coffee, a half-finished crossword, and a call log that hadn't changed in nearly 40 minutes. Then the phone rang. I answered it without thinking. "Troy's Towing. What's your location?" All I heard was breathing. Slow. Careful. Like whoever was on the other end was trying not to be noticed. "Hello," I said. The breathing stopped. For a second, I thought the line had gone dead. Then I heard a faint sound, like fabric shifting, and something that might have been a footstep on a hard floor. "Sir, if you're calling for service, I need your location." There was a pause, and then a man's voice said, "You already have it." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a moment, then checked the call log. No number. Just unknown. I shrugged it off. Drunk caller. Prank. Wrong number. It happens. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same thing. No number. I answered. Troy's towing. This time, there was no breathing. Just silence. "Look," I said, a little annoyed now. "If you need help, say something." A soft click sounded, like someone pressing a button on their phone. Then I heard my own voice. "Not live. Recorded. Please don't pick up again." I felt my stomach tighten. "That's not funny," I said, even though I wasn't sure anyone was still on the line. The call ended. I checked the system logs. No outgoing calls. No recorded messages sent. Nothing unusual. I told myself it was a coincidence. Someone using a soundboard. Someone messing with me. There are 1,000 ways to fake a voice over a phone line. Still, I didn't like it. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed on the desk. Voicemail notification. From my own number. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the screen, waiting for the logic part of my brain to come up with an explanation that made sense. Some kind of glitch. A loop in the system. A misrouted call. Finally, I tapped it. The message started with static. Then my voice came through, quiet and tense. "I don't know how you're hearing this. If this is working, then you already answered. That means you didn't listen." There was a pause, like I was thinking about what to say next. "Please don't pick up again," my voice said. "It learns faster when you do." The message cut off. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the lights and the distant sound of rain hitting the windows. My hands were cold, not from the room, but from the slow, creeping realization that the voice on that recording wasn't just similar to mine. It was mine, down to the way I hesitated before certain words. I called my manager, Dave. It went to voicemail. I left a message telling him something was wrong with the phone system and that I might need him to come in. Then the phone rang again. I didn't want to answer it. I watched it ring, my heart pounding, until it stopped on its own. A second later, my phone buzzed. Another voicemail. I opened it. This time, the recording started immediately. "You're doing it again," my voice said. "You're waiting. That's worse." There was a sound in the background. A low, steady noise, like air moving through a narrow space. "I can hear it now," my voice continued. "It's closer to you than it was to me." I stood up so fast my chair fell over. That's when I noticed something I should have seen earlier. The office had gone quiet. Not normal quiet. Not late-night quiet. The hum of the lights was gone. The rain against the windows had stopped. Even the old wall clock over the filing cabinet wasn't ticking anymore. It was like someone had turned the volume of the world all the way down. The phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. On the fourth ring, the voicemail notification popped up without the call ending. I opened it with shaking hands. This one wasn't my voice. It was a woman's voice. Calm. Professional. "Emergency services. What is your situation?" I recognized it immediately. It was the recording from the training video we had to watch when I started. The example dispatcher voice. Then the voice changed. "You said you would stop answering." The line filled with that same low, rushing sound I'd heard before, louder now, like wind through a long tunnel. "You made it notice you." The message ended. I backed away from the desk and grabbed my jacket. I didn't care if Dave thought I was overreacting. I didn't care if I got written up. I just wanted to get out of that building. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a voicemail. It was an incoming call. From my own number. I didn't answer it. I turned and headed for the door. Halfway across the office, the lights flickered back on. The hum returned. The rain started again, like someone had pressed play on the world. The phone stopped ringing. I stood there, breathing hard, listening. Nothing else happened. I left the building and drove home with the radio on loud, just to prove to myself that sound still worked the way it was supposed to. The next morning, Dave called me. He said I'd left him a really strange voicemail at 2:17 a.m. He played it for me over the phone. It was my voice, tired and scared. "Hey Dave, it's me. I think something's wrong with the lines tonight. If you get this, don't answer any calls from my number. And whatever you do, don't listen to the messages after the first one. It just makes it worse." I don't remember leaving that message. I checked my call history. There was no record of it. Dave told me not to worry about it. Phone systems glitch. People get tired. Weird things happen on night shifts. I quit 2 weeks later. Sometimes, when my phone rings late at night, I still hesitate before answering. And every once in a while, I'll find a missed call in my log that doesn't have a number attached to it. Just my name. And a voicemail notification I never open. The woman who died had my name written on her hand. Not my first name. Not my last. Both. Spelled correctly, in black ink. Like she was afraid she'd forget it before the end. The police asked me how she could have known who I was. I didn't have an answer that made sense. At the time, I was working part-time as a night clerk at a small motel just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona. The kind of place people stop at because they're too tired to keep driving or because they don't want to pay city prices. 12 rooms, a flickering sign, and a front desk that smelled faintly like old coffee and lemon cleaner. Most nights were quiet. Truckers, couples passing through, the occasional family that misjudged how far they could get before dark. That night started with a storm. Not rain. Wind. The kind that makes the building creak and the doors rattle in their frames. Sand from the desert scraped against the windows like someone dragging their nails across glass. I was halfway through a paperback I'd already read twice when the bell on the front desk rang. I looked up, expecting to see headlights in the parking lot. There were none. The glass door to the office was closed, but standing on the other side of it was a woman in a light-colored coat. Her hair was dark and wet-looking, even though it hadn't rained. She was staring straight at me, not at the sign that said vacancy, not at the hours taped to the door, just at me. I got up and unlocked the door. I shouldn't have. That's the part one go over in my head the most. The moment where I still had a choice and didn't realize it mattered. Sorry, she said as soon as I opened it. Her voice was calm, but there was something tight in it, like she was holding herself together on purpose. I know it's late. I just need a room. Just for tonight. Do you have a car? I asked, glancing past her into the empty lot. No, she said. I was dropped off. That wasn't unusual. The highway wasn't far. People get rides. People walk. Still, something about the way she said it made me hesitate. I'll need an ID, I said. She nodded and reached into her pocket, then stopped. Her hand stayed there for a second, like she'd forgotten what she was looking for. I must have left it, she said. I'm sorry. I can pay cash. I just need somewhere to sleep. Policy said no ID, no room. But it was late. The wind was loud. And she looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than just being tired. I told myself it would be fine. I took her cash, gave her the key to room 6, and wrote, no ID, in the logbook with a little star next to it, so I'd remember to tell my manager in the morning. She thanked me, took the key, and walked back out into the wind. I watched her go to the room and close the door behind her. Then I sat back down and tried to get back into my book. About 20 minutes later, the phone rang. I answered it. Front desk. There was no one on the line. Hello. I said. Nothing. I hung up, a little annoyed, and made a note in the log. Wrong number, maybe. 5 minutes after that, the phone rang again. Same thing. Silence. On the third call, I didn't say anything. I just listened. At first, all I heard was that low, hollow sound you get on a bad connection. Then, very faintly, I heard breathing. Not into the phone. In the office. I turned in my chair and looked at the open doorway that led to the hallway behind the front desk. The hallway that led to the supply closet, the laundry room, and the back exit. It was empty. The breathing stopped. The line went dead. I stood up, my heart beating a little faster than it should have, and checked the back hallway. Nothing. Just the buzzing fluorescent lights and the smell of detergent. I told myself I was imagining things. Around 1:30 a.m., I saw her again. She was standing outside the office window, looking in. This time, her coat was gone. She was wearing a thin shirt, and her arms were wrapped around herself like she was cold. Her hair was dry now, and her face looked flatter, somehow. Less expressive, like someone had taken a picture of a person and then forgotten to finish rendering it. I went to the door and opened it a crack. Is everything okay? Do you need something? I can't sleep, she said. It's too loud in there. The wind. I asked. She shook her head. The other room. There is no other room, I said, without really thinking about it. She looked at me for a long moment. Yes, she said. There is. I didn't know what to say to that. I can move you to a different room, I offered. Or I can give you a refund. She smiled, just a little. It doesn't help. It follows. That should have been the point where I called the police, or at least my manager. Instead, I did the stupid, human thing and tried to fix it myself. Which room is it? I asked. She pointed, not at room 6, but at the far end of the building. At the maintenance door. There, she said. It's behind that one. The maintenance door led to a narrow storage area and, beyond that, to a blank wall. I'd been back there dozens of times. There was nothing special about it. I'll check, I said. She nodded. It doesn't like it when you look, but it will wait. I don't know why I listened to her. I took my flashlight and went down the walkway outside, the wind pushing at my back. The maintenance door was where it always was. Locked. Solid. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The storage area was quiet. Shelves. Old boxes. A broken chair in the corner. The blank wall at the end looked the same as ever. Then I heard something on the other side of it. Not a voice. Not a knock. A slow, careful sound, like someone pressing their ear against the wall and sliding it along the surface. I backed away, my stomach turning cold. The sound followed me. Always on the other side of the wall. Always just out of reach. I left the storage room and locked the door behind me. When I turned around, she was standing there. You heard it, she said. Yes, I said. I think you should leave. I can call someone for you. A taxi. The police. Whoever you need. She shook her head. It's too late for that. You already let it know I was here. I don't understand. You will, she said. But not tonight. She went back to room 6. I didn't see her again. At 6:10 a.m., my manager called me, asking why there were police cars in the parking lot. I looked outside and saw them. 2 cruisers, lights off. Officers talking quietly near room 6. They found her in the bathroom. No signs of a struggle. No sign that anyone else had been there. Just her, on the floor, and my name written on her hand. Both names. Spelled right. They asked me everything. About when she arrived. About why I'd rented her a room without ID. About whether I knew her. I told them the truth. They didn't look convinced. When they left, one of the officers paused and asked me a question I still think about. Did she say anyone was with her? I told him no. He nodded slowly. That's strange. Because the coroner says she wasn't alone when she died. There are marks on the wall in the bathroom, like someone was standing behind it, pressing against it, from the inside. Room 6 was taken out of service after that. My manager said it was for renovations. They tore out the bathroom wall. They didn't find anything behind it. Sometimes I still think about the way she said it. You already let it know I was here. And I wonder what, exactly, I let in. The list was already printed when I found my name on it. That's the part that still bothers me. If it had been written by hand, if it had looked rushed or sloppy, I could have told myself someone made a mistake. But it wasn't. It was neat, centered, alphabetized. And right there, between 2 names I didn't recognize, was mine. I wasn't supposed to be on that list. At the time, I was working as a substitute driver for a county transportation service in rural Indiana. We handled a little bit of everything: senior rides to medical appointments, late-night hospital discharges, occasional transfers between small clinics that didn't have their own vehicles. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and most shifts were quiet enough to let your mind wander. That night, I got a call from dispatch just before midnight. They told me there was a pickup at a long-term care facility about 40 minutes outside town. A patient being transferred to a larger hospital for observation. The regular driver had called in sick, and I was the only one close enough to take it. The address didn't mean anything to me, but the name of the facility did. Gray Ridge Extended Care. It was one of those places everyone in the county knew about, but nobody talked about much. Not because anything bad had happened there, at least not officially. It was just old. Remote. The kind of building that had been added onto so many times that no one was entirely sure how many corridors it had anymore. I punched the address into the GPS and headed out. The roads were empty, and a low fog was starting to creep in from the fields, turning the world into a series of floating patches of light and shadow. By the time I reached the turnoff, my headlights felt like they were cutting tunnels through milk. Gray Ridge sat at the end of a long, cracked driveway. The building was bigger than I expected, a wide, squat structure with dark wings stretching out on either side like arms. Most of the windows were dark. Only a few on the first floor were lit. I parked near the main entrance and went inside with my clipboard. The lobby was quiet. Too quiet for a place that was supposed to be staffed around the clock. The front desk was empty, but a bell sat there, polished and waiting. I rang it. After a few seconds, a man in scrubs came out from a side door. He looked tired in the way only people who work too many night shifts do. You the driver? He asked. Yeah, here for a transfer. He nodded and gestured for me to follow him. We've got everything ready. Paperwork's already done. That was fast, I said, half joking. He didn't smile. We like to keep things moving. We walked down a long hallway that smelled faintly of antiseptic and something older, something like dust that had been trapped in fabric for years. The lights buzzed overhead, and our footsteps echoed in a way that made the building feel emptier than it probably was. We stopped at a set of double doors marked records. Inside was a small office with filing cabinets, a desk, and a printer that was still warm. On the desk was a stack of papers. The list was on top. It was a single page with a header that read, Overnight Transfers, Priority Order. Below it was a column of names. I recognized one or two from previous runs. Mostly, they were strangers. And then I saw mine. I laughed, because that's what you do when your brain doesn't want to deal with something yet. Hey, looks like someone put me on the patient list. The man in scrubs looked at the page, then at me. No, he said. That's the driver list. I felt the smile fade from my face. What do you mean? The order we send them out, he said. In case something changes. Sometimes we have to swap vehicles or routes. Easier to keep it organized. I stared at the paper. Why is my name on it? He hesitated. Just for a second. Must be a clerical thing, he said. Happens sometimes. He picked up the stack and slid it into a folder, like he didn't want me looking at it anymore. Who's the patient? I asked. He told me a name I didn't recognize. An older man. Non-emergency transfer. Observation only. Where is he? I asked. Already waiting, he said. Room C12. We walked again, deeper into the building. Past wings that were dark. Past doors with signs that said closed for renovation. Past hallways that felt like they should have ended sooner than they did. Room C12 was at the end of a narrow corridor with no windows. The patient was already in a wheelchair, a thin man with gray hair and a blanket over his legs. He looked calm, almost bored. Evening, I said, forcing a normal tone. I'm here to take you to the hospital. He looked up at me and frowned. That's not my name, he said. What? He pointed at the folder in my hand. The name you said. That's not mine. I checked the paperwork. Then I checked it again. He was right. The photo ID clipped to the folder was him. The room number matched. But the name on the top line wasn't. I'm sorry, I said. Let me just. Doesn't matter, he said, waving a thin hand. They never get it right the first time. They? I asked. But he was already rolling himself forward a little, like he wanted to get going. We headed back toward the exit. The man in scrubs was waiting near the lobby, talking quietly to a woman I hadn't seen before. She was holding another clipboard. He stopped when he saw us and looked at the folder in my hand. Everything set? He asked. The name's wrong, I said. He glanced at the patient, then back at me. It's fine. The hospital will sort it out. The woman with the clipboard looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl. Not angry, not curious. Evaluating. I signed the transfer form, loaded the patient into the back of the van, and drove off. The fog was thicker now, pressing in on the road until the world felt small and fragile, like it could disappear if I wasn't careful. About 10 minutes into the drive, my radio crackled. Unit 12, do you copy? That was dispatch. Copy, I said. Just confirming. You picked up the patient from Grayridge? Yes. There was a pause. We're showing 2 transfers scheduled from that facility tonight. 2. Yes. The second one just came in. They said the first one left without the correct paperwork. I felt a chill run through me. What does that mean? It means they're asking us to send another driver. I have the patient, I said. He's in the back. Another pause. Longer this time. Can you confirm the name on your paperwork? I read it out loud. Dispatch went quiet. That's not the patient's name, she said. That's your name. I almost swerved. What? The second transfer, she said slowly, like she was choosing each word. The one that just came in. That request is for you. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. This isn't funny, I said. I'm not joking, she said. Grayridge just sent over the file. The patient name matches yours. Date of birth matches. They say it's a clerical error, but they want you to return and confirm in person. I looked in the rearview mirror at the man in the back. He was watching me, not confused, not worried, almost sympathetic. You should take me back, he said quietly. Why? I asked. Because, he said, If you don't, they'll just print a new list. I didn't go back. I took him to the hospital, dropped him off, and told them there was a mix-up in the paperwork. They took him in without asking many questions. I went home and didn't sleep. The next morning, I called dispatch and told them I was done. Effective immediately. They didn't argue. A week later, I drove past the turnoff to Gray Ridge and saw a line of vans in the driveway. County vehicles. Private ambulances. More than I'd ever seen there before. I still think about that list. How neat it was. How final it looked. And I wonder whose name was at the top before mine. They didn't believe me when I said the footprints were upside down. I don't blame them. If I hadn't seen them myself, I wouldn't have believed it either. Even now, when I try to explain it, I can hear how it sounds. Like something you'd say after too many sleepless nights or one bad dream too many. But the ceiling tiles were cracked, and something had been walking up there. I was working as a facilities tech for a small school district in northern Michigan. Mostly boring stuff, leaky faucets, broken lights, jammed doors. The kind of job where you spend a lot of time in empty hallways after everyone's gone home. That winter, the district decided to save money by doing a lot of the maintenance after hours. Less disruption, they said. Less complaints. More quiet. They weren't wrong about the quiet. The call that started it came from the high school. A night custodian named Ron said he was hearing noises in the science wing after midnight. Scraping sounds. Thumps. Like something heavy being dragged across the ceiling. Probably raccoons, I told him over the phone. Or squirrels. They get in through the vents sometimes. Yeah, he said. That's what I thought too. But it's not moving like an animal. What do you mean? It stops, he said. And then it starts again. Like it's thinking about where to go next. I told him I'd come take a look. The school was dark when I arrived. Just a few emergency lights and the glow from the custodian's office down the hall. The building smelled like floor cleaner and cold air, that sharp, empty smell you only get in big places after hours. Ron met me near the science wing. He was a heavy-set guy in his 50s with a permanent look of mild concern on his face. Tonight, that concern had turned into something closer to worry. It's been doing it for about an hour, he said quietly, like he didn't want to announce our presence. Comes and goes. We stood in the hallway and listened. At first, there was nothing. Then I heard it. A slow, dragging sound above us. Not scurrying. Not scratching. More like something being pulled across the ceiling tiles. See, Ron said. Told you. We followed the sound to one of the chemistry labs. It was coming from directly overhead. I grabbed a ladder from the storage closet and climbed up to one of the ceiling panels. The tiles were the cheap, fibrous kind, stained in places from old leaks. I pushed one aside and shined my flashlight up into the space above. Ducts. Wires. Dust. No animals. No nests. No movement. The sound stopped. Probably scared it off, I said. If it comes back, we'll call animal control in the morning. Ron didn't look convinced, but he nodded. I was halfway down the ladder when he said, It's starting again. This time, it wasn't above the lab. It was farther down the hall. We walked, our footsteps echoing softly, and listened as the sound moved away from us, slow and deliberate. It stopped, then started again, then stopped, like it was aware of us. We tracked it to the old art room, a part of the building that hadn't been used much since budget cuts. The lights were off in there, and the windows were covered with paper to protect old supplies from sun damage. The sound was right above the doorway. I climbed the ladder again and moved another ceiling tile. The flashlight beam caught something I didn't understand at first. Marks. Long, faint lines in the dust that coated the top of the tiles and the metal supports. Like someone had dragged the soles of their shoes across it. But they weren't oriented the way they should have been. They were upside down. The heel marks were toward the wall. The toe marks were toward the hallway. Like someone had been walking on the ceiling. Ron, I said slowly, you need to look at this. He climbed up behind me and stared into the space. What the hell is that? He whispered. Footprints, I said. Or something like them. He laughed, a short, nervous sound. That's not funny. I'm not joking. We followed the marks with the flashlight. They went in a straight line for several feet, then stopped. No turn. No scuffing like something had climbed down. Just ended. Maybe it's from when they installed the ducts, Ron said, but his voice didn't sound like he believed it. Upside down. I asked. He didn't answer. Over the next week, the calls kept coming. Different parts of the school. Different times of night. Same sound. Same dragging movement above the ceiling. And every time we checked, there were more marks. Always in dust. Always in places no one should be able to reach. Always oriented like something heavy was walking upside down. We brought in animal control. They found nothing. We brought in a contractor to check the ductwork. He said everything was sealed. The principal suggested it was just old marks we were noticing for the first time. Then one night, Ron didn't show up for his shift. That wasn't like him. He was never late. Never missed a night. I called his phone. No answer. Around 2 a.m. I was in the main hallway near the science wing when I heard the sound again. But this time, it wasn't in the ceiling. It was above the ceiling and in the ceiling. Two directions at once. I stood there, my skin prickling, and listened as the dragging noise moved slowly toward me. Then the ceiling tile a few feet ahead of me shifted. Just a little. Dust fell in a thin stream onto the floor. I took a step back. The tile shifted again. Something pressed against it from above. Not hard enough to break through. Just enough to leave an impression. The shape of a foot. Upside down. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my truck with the doors locked. The next morning, they found Ron in the boiler room. He was alive, but he wouldn't talk. He just sat there, staring at the wall, his hands wrapped around his own arms like he was cold. When they got him to the hospital, a nurse noticed something strange. There were long, dark marks on the bottoms of his shoes. Dusty. Smeared. Like he'd been walking somewhere upside down. They closed the science wing after that. Officially, it was for structural inspection. Unofficially, no one wanted to work there at night anymore. I quit a month later. They replaced the ceiling tiles, cleaned the ductwork, repainted the halls. But every once in a while, when I drive past that school late at night, I think about something Ron said once, weeks before he stopped talking. We were standing under the hallway lights, listening to the sound move away from us. And he said, very quietly, I don't think it's in the ceiling. I think the ceiling is just where it puts its feet. By the time anyone noticed the first name was missing, 3 houses had already been sold. Not abandoned. Not boarded up. Sold. With furniture still inside. With photos still on the walls. With mail still arriving for people who, according to the records, had never lived there at all. I found out about it because I was the one updating the maps. For 2 years, I worked for a small regional planning office in southern Utah. My job was to digitize property records for a cluster of rural towns that didn't have the budget to do it themselves. Most days, that meant scanning old deeds, cross-checking addresses, and correcting little errors that had piled up over decades. It was boring, predictable, safe, until I got assigned to Red Willow. Red Willow wasn't really a town in the way people think of towns. It was more like a loose collection of houses, a gas station, a diner, and a post office, all stretched along a single highway. The kind of place you only stopped in if you were low on fuel or too tired to keep driving. The county wanted the records cleaned up because a developer had bought some land nearby and needed accurate maps. I drove out there on a Monday morning and planned to be done by Friday. By Tuesday afternoon, I realized something was wrong. It started with a house on the east end of town. According to the county file, it belonged to a man named Harold Benton. Lived there for 15 years. Paid his taxes. No issues. But when I went to confirm the address, the woman at the post office frowned. Harold who? She asked. Benton, I said. He lives at 114 East Ridge. She shook her head. No one lives there. That house sold last month. Sold by who? She hesitated. I don't remember. That was odd, but not impossible. Small towns forget things. People move. Records lag behind. I drove to the house. It wasn't empty. There was a car in the driveway. Curtains in the windows. A porch light on. I knocked. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I walked around the side and peeked through a window. The living room was furnished. Neatly. Family photos on a shelf. A jacket draped over a chair like someone had just set it down. On the coffee table was a stack of mail. All addressed to Harold Benton. I went back to my car and checked the county database again. The entry for 114 East Ridge was gone. Not marked inactive. Not transferred. Gone. Like it had never existed. I thought it was a software glitch. I added a note, flagged it for review, and moved on. The next day, it happened again. Different house. Different name. Same problem. According to my printed list, a woman named Susan Keller lived on Maple Street. According to the diner waitress, that house had always been empty. But when I drove by, it wasn't. There was a bike leaning against the porch. A light on in the back room. A dog bowl on the steps. And inside, through the window, I could see someone's shoes by the door. I checked the database. No Susan Keller. No Maple Street resident at that address. No record of the house ever being assigned a name. By Wednesday, I had 4 addresses like that. Occupied houses. No official owners. And when I asked people in town, they either didn't recognize the names or looked at me like I was asking about someone who had died a long time ago. "Are you sure you didn't mean the old Miller place?" one man asked, pointing toward a gas station that had closed in the 90s. "No," I said. "This is a different street." He frowned. "There is no different street." That night, I stayed at the only motel in town. It was quiet in that way desert towns get after dark, when the highway noise fades and all you're left with is wind and distant insects. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I got up and opened my laptop. I checked the database again. 3 more entries were missing. Not flagged. Not archived. Just gone. I compared it to the backup from the week before. The backups were changing too. It wasn't just current data. The older files were being altered. Like the system was slowly rewriting its own history. I drove out early the next morning and went back to 114 East Ridge. This time, the house was empty. Not, no one answered, empty. Empty. The car was gone. The curtains were gone. The jacket, the photos, the mail, everything. It looked like a house that had been staged for sale and then stripped. The neighbors watched me from across the street. When I asked them if anyone had lived there yesterday, they shook their heads. "No," one of them said. "That place has been empty for years." I showed them the photo I'd taken through the window the day before. They stared at it. "That's not this house," the woman said. "You must be mixed up." But I wasn't. By Thursday, the diner was missing a waitress. Not fired. Not sick. Missing. The owner told me he'd never had a waitress with that name. I'd paid her for coffee the day before. On Friday morning, I went to the post office to ship my reports. The clerk looked at me and said, "You're not on the schedule." "I'm not here for mail," I said. "I'm working with the county." She blinked. "The county sent someone?" "Yes. Me." She frowned at her screen. "There's no record of that." I drove back to the motel to pack. My room number wasn't on the board anymore. The clerk said they'd never rented it. I checked out anyway and drove straight back to the main office. When I got there, my supervisor looked confused when he saw me. "I thought you finished that assignment months ago," he said. "What?" I asked. "You updated Red Willow in March," he said. "We closed the file." I pulled up my emails. They were gone. Not deleted. Never sent. The drive logs on my phone still showed the trips. The photos were still there. But the town? In the system, Red Willow was just a blank stretch of road with a gas station and a diner. No side streets. No houses. No residents. I quit a week later. Sometimes I still check the satellite maps. The buildings are there. The shadows are there. But when you zoom in, there are no labels. No addresses. No names. And every few months, I notice a house disappear. Not burned down. Not demolished. Just unmarked. Like it was never meant to be remembered. The folder with my name on it was older than I am. That's what the archivist told me, anyway. She said it like she was apologizing for the inconvenience, like it was my fault for being surprised. The label was typed in faded ink on yellowing paper, and the edges of the folder were soft from being handled too many times. Inside were photographs I had never seen taken, and records of things I hadn't done yet. I used to work as a junior compliance officer for a regional utility company in New England. Boring title, boring work. Mostly I made sure different departments were following record-keeping rules. Once a month, I'd visit one of our older facilities and check their archives before everything got shipped off to be digitized or destroyed. That's how I ended up in Fairhaven. Fairhaven was a hydroelectric station built in the 1940s, tucked into a narrow valley with a river running through it. Most of the original buildings were still in use, and most of the original paperwork was still stored on-site in a climate-controlled room that smelled like cardboard and dust. The archivist's name was Linda. She was in her late 60s, wore thick glasses, and moved carefully, like she didn't trust the building not to shift under her feet. "Most of this is maintenance logs," she said as she walked me down the aisle of metal shelves. "Turbine inspections, incident reports, safety audits, that sort of thing." I nodded and started checking labels against my list. Everything looked normal, until I reached the last shelf. The folders there weren't labeled by department or year. They were labeled with names. At first, I thought they were employee files. That wouldn't have been strange. Old personnel records sometimes ended up in odd places. Then I saw my own name, first and last, spelled correctly, on a folder that looked like it had been there for decades. Linda, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Why is there a file here with my name on it? She adjusted her glasses and looked. Oh, she said. You found yours. Mine. She nodded, like this was expected. They're all down here. All who? She didn't answer right away. She walked a few steps down the aisle and pulled out another folder. This one had a different name on it. I recognized it. It was the name of a supervisor who had retired the year before. She opened it. Inside were photographs of him at different ages. Some looked like old ID photos. Some looked like candid shots taken from across a room. There were copies of report cards, a college transcript, a marriage certificate, and, at the back, a death notice. He's not dead, I said. Not yet, she replied. But that one's been there since 2019. I laughed, because again, that's what you do when reality doesn't feel stable. You're saying these are predictions? Records, she said. They've always been records. She put the folder back and took mine off the shelf. Yours is newer than most, she said. But the container is old. They must have reassigned it. Reassigned what? The space, she said. They reuse the folders sometimes. Saves room. She opened mine. The first page was a copy of my birth certificate. Correct hospital. Correct date. I felt a cold, slow pressure in my chest. The next few pages were school records. Old addresses. Photos from my teenage years that I recognized from family albums. Where did you get these? I asked. They've always been here, she said. At least as long as I have. How long is that? 32 years. I flipped further. There were pages that didn't make sense yet. A photo of me standing in front of a building I'd never seen. A report stamped with the utility company's logo and dated 3 years in the future. A note in the margin that read, "Subject shows increased awareness after exposure. Monitor accordingly." Who writes these? I asked. She shrugged. We just file them. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have, she said. I took the folder back to the table and sat down. Near the end, there was a section labeled incidents. Most of it was blank, except for one entry. It was dated 2 weeks from that day. It listed the Fairhaven facility, and next to it, in neat, typed text, were the words, "Unscheduled access." 1 fatality. Records updated. My hands started to shake. Who dies? I asked. Linda looked at the page. She didn't seem surprised. I don't know, she said. It doesn't always say. I closed the folder. This is some kind of joke, I said. Or a test. Or, do you want to see the older ones? She asked. She led me back down the aisle and pulled out another folder. Then another. Some of the names were crossed out. Some had red stamps that said complete. One had a small black ribbon sticker on the corner. That means they're done, she said. No more updates. Done how? She met my eyes. They don't come back. I left early that day. I told my manager there was a problem with the archive room. I didn't explain what kind. 2 weeks later, there was an accident at Fairhaven. A contractor fell from a service platform and died. The report made the local news. I found the article online and felt my stomach drop when I read the name. It was the supervisor whose folder I'd seen, the one Linda had shown me. I went back to Fairhaven the next day. The archive room was gone. Not empty. Gone. The door led to a concrete wall. No shelves. No folders. No Linda. The facility manager told me there had never been an archive room there. Records were kept off-site, he said. Always had been. I checked the incident report. At the bottom, in small print, was a line I didn't remember seeing before. Records updated. I quit a month later. Sometimes, when I think about it too much, I wonder if my folder is still there, or if it's already been stamped. The letter thanked me for agreeing. That was the first line. Not inviting. Not requesting. Not confirming my interest. Thanking me. Like I had already said yes. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from a town I'd never been to. Inside was a single page, typed, no signature. Thank you for your cooperation. Your participation has been noted. Please be present at the assigned location at 6 a.m. Transportation will not be provided. Further instructions will be given on arrival. At the bottom was an address. It was my address. Not my house. Not my street. My address. Name. Apartment number. City. Zip code. As if whoever wrote it wanted to be very clear about where I already was. At the time, I was working nights as a quality control inspector for a small packaging plant in upstate New York. My job was to check random shipments before they went out, sign off on paperwork, and make sure nothing obvious was wrong. It paid well enough, and the hours fit my life. The days were quiet. Predictable. This letter wasn't. I checked my email. Nothing. I checked my work schedule. Normal. No note. No change. No message from my supervisor. I told myself it was a mistake. Some kind of clerical error. A scam. A prank that didn't quite land. I threw the letter away. The next morning, my phone alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. I hadn't set it. I checked the settings. No new alarms. No calendar entries. No reminders. Just the sound and the sudden, uncomfortable feeling that I was already late for something I didn't remember agreeing to. I went to work that night and tried to forget about it. At 2:14 a.m., one of the machines jammed, and I had to walk down to the far end of the floor to sign off on a maintenance check. When I came back to my desk, there was another envelope waiting for me. Same plain white paper. Same no return address. Inside was another single page. We noticed you did not confirm. That is not a problem. You were included regardless. Please do not create unnecessary delays. At the bottom, in smaller text, arrival time adjusted, 6:15 a.m. I felt a tight, cold sensation settle behind my ribs. I called my supervisor, Mark. It went to voicemail. I left a message telling him someone was leaving strange mail for me at work and asking if this was some kind of internal audit or training exercise. He never called back. When I got home in the morning, my building's front door was unlocked. That wasn't normal. The landlord was obsessive about security. He'd installed new locks just a few months earlier and sent out 3 emails about not letting anyone in behind you. In the lobby, taped neatly to the bulletin board, was a printed notice. Elevator maintenance. Out of service from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. I lived on the 3rd floor. I checked my watch. It was 5:58 a.m. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the stairs. Then I laughed at myself, because this was ridiculous. Coincidences happen. Schedules overlap. Buildings do maintenance. Letters get misdelivered. I went up the stairs and into my apartment. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer it. A second later, a text message appeared. You're still inside. I felt my pulse pick up. I typed back. Who is this? 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. You don't need to reply. You just need to be present. I turned off my phone. I made coffee. I tried to act normal. I told myself that if this was some kind of scam, engaging with it was the worst thing I could do. At 6:12 a.m., someone knocked on my door. Not a loud knock. Not urgent. 3 calm, evenly spaced taps. I didn't answer. The knock came again. I stayed where I was, standing in my kitchen, holding a mug I wasn't drinking from. A voice spoke from the hallway. Not raised. Not threatening. Your arrival time was adjusted. You're creating a delay. Go away, I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. There was a pause. Then the voice said, we don't need you to open the door. I heard something slide against the wood. Not forced. Not violent. Deliberate. The deadbolt turned. I hadn't unlocked it. The door opened a few inches. I stepped back, my heart hammering. Standing in the hallway was a man in a gray jacket and a woman in a dark blue coat. They looked ordinary. Office job ordinary. Like they were on their way to a meeting and had taken a wrong turn. Neither of them smiled. We're already behind schedule, the woman said. Please bring what you need for the day. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said. The man looked past me, into my apartment, like he was checking something off a list. You won't need much, he said. You won't be returning here. That's not your decision, I said. The woman tilted her head slightly. It already was. I reached for my phone. The man said, there's no signal. We accounted for that. I backed toward the kitchen, my mind racing. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew I wasn't going to calmly walk out of my apartment with 2 strangers who spoke like this was all a formality. Call the police, I said. If this is official, they can come here. They exchanged a glance. We don't use the police, the woman said. It creates paperwork. She stepped forward. I ran. Not toward the door. Toward the back of the apartment. Toward the fire escape. I heard them follow, but not fast. Not chasing. Just keeping pace. Like they knew exactly where I was going to end up. I threw open the window and climbed out onto the metal steps. The morning air was cold and sharp, and the city sounded normal. Cars. Distant sirens. Someone arguing on the sidewalk across the street. I started down the fire escape. Halfway to the second floor, I heard the woman's voice again. Calm. Unhurried. You don't need to run. You're already on the list. I kept going. When I reached the ground, I didn't look back. I ran down the block, turned a corner, and didn't stop until my lungs burned. I ducked into a coffee shop and sat in a corner, shaking. I checked my phone. No signal. No bars. No data. Just one new message. You're not at the location. I stayed there for 3 hours. Nothing happened. No one followed me in. No one tried to drag me out. Eventually, my phone signal came back. I called Mark again. This time, he answered. He sounded confused when I told him what had happened. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. But we were told you wouldn't be in today. Told by who? I don't know. HR, I guess. There was a note in the system. What did it say? He hesitated. It said you'd been reassigned. To where? I don't have that information. I never went back to that apartment. I stayed with a friend for a while, then moved. New city. New job. New number. For a few months, nothing happened. Then, one day, I got a letter at my new address. Plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a single page. Thank you for eventually complying. The delay has been noted. Future assignments may require less flexibility. At the bottom, in smaller text, your file has been updated. I don't know what I was assigned to. I don't know what I avoided by running. But sometimes, when I wake up before my alarm goes off, I have the feeling that I'm already late for something. And that somewhere, a list is being printed, with my name on it.